back to the broadcast, Govern America. Dr. Timothy Ball is a renowned environmental consultant and former climatology professor at the University of Winnipeg, Manitoba. He has a doctorate in climatology from the University of London, Queen Mary College, England, and Dr. Ball's comprehensive background in the field includes a strong focus on the reconstruction of past climates and the impact of climate change on human history and the human condition. He is a researcher and or author of numerous scientific papers on a range of environmental issues. He is also co-author of the book 18th Century Naturalists of Hudson Bay with Dr. Stuart Houston, one of the world's leading authorities on Arctic birds. Dr. Ball is also published frequently in leading newspapers and magazines across Canada and increasingly the U.S. and abroad, and we're pleased to have him today on Govern America. Dr. Ball, welcome to the broadcast.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Listen, I want to ask you, first of all, what made you go into the field of climatology?
Well, that's a very good question, because when I started in it, two things. One, global cooling was the consensus, and the other was I thought, well, here's a very interesting area with no controversy at all. And, of course, was I surprised? Not that I'm not prepared to handle the issues that are going on, but it arose out. I flew in the Canadian Air Force, and 4 years of that was out over the Atlantic chasing Russian submarines, although nobody ever told us what we'd do if we caught one. And then I flew 5 years of search and rescue in the Arctic, and that gave me a tremendous appreciation of the planet, but particularly the weather conditions and how people coped with it. And then I lost my flying category because of a hearing loss. I didn't want to fly a desk. And I got a small cash settlement and went back to university. And by the way, I happen to think that's the best way to go to university, is when you've got a bit of life experience under your belt. Then you can. It makes much more sense. And decided that there was no at that time there was no real awareness of people and their interaction with nature. And particularly whether we were affecting the nature or not. And so I started looking at that. But it was a professor at the University of Chicago by the name of Thomas who wrote a very interesting book called Man's Role in Changing the Earth. And so that really got me started. And the Hudson Bay part of it is that the fur trade, the Hudson Bay Company, the weather was critical not only to their commerce, but also to their survival, because they lived off the land, and they kept incredible records. In fact, we've got thermometer records at Churchill going back to 1768. And when you start to look at that, then you start to understand how much the climate changes naturally.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think the other side, in many cases, would like to paint us, those who they call the skeptics of anthropogenic greenhouse warming, as being people who hate the environment. You know, we're all in favor of killing, Arctic polar bears and polluting everything. And I think what I'm hearing here is that you were interested in preserving some of nature and what have you.
Oh, totally. But of course, that's one of the things that is part of what academics call a paradigm shift, and that was the introduction of the concept of environmentalism. Very, very necessary. There's still some changes we need to make, but what happens when a paradigm shift like that occurs is that people are basically small c conservative. That is, that they change is worrisome to them, and they tend to look at it and are hesitant about change, and they don't know how far to go with an idea. I mean, feminism is another paradigm of the 20th century that changed our whole view of ourselves and everything else. And to me, is one of the fundamental things, by the way, in the rest of the world, the freedom for women. But anyway, the majority of women are saying, well, how far do we go with this? And then what I learned over my career is the role of extremists. I've been attacked by them all my career. I thought, well, what's the purpose? It's almost like, well, if we got rid of all the mosquitoes, would the world really come to an end? Mm-hmm. And then I finally realized that the role of the extremist is to define the limits for the rest of us, for the majority. And so with the feminist movement, some women started doing silly things, extreme things, and the majority looked at it and said, oh no, now we're losing more than we're gaining. Yeah. And that set the limit. Okay, well the same is happening with the environmentalist movement. And I'll give you an illustration of how I do a lot of work with the school children, because the schools are being used to propagandize children. And parents should find out what's being taught to their children in the schools.
Absolutely.
Right, and one of the things that I do is doing a grade 12 class recently, and I say, you guys care about the environment? And of course you get all the rah, 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 rah cheering. And then when they calm down a bit, I say, okay, none of you will ever drive cars. And you get that look on their face.
Oh,
that, so I say, well, I don't care that much, right? and of course what I've done is make them think about how far they're willing to go with this commitment. And of course, that's what's happening to the world now. And people were starting to look at it before this scandal erupted, and starting to say, well, look, no, this is costing us jobs. This is causing huge economic cost. Mm-hmm. And how far do we want to go with this? And so, as I say, that was already happening before the climate scandal hit.
Yeah.
And it's a very good process, a necessary process. As I said, and one of the things that's really frustrating is these groups that grabbed onto this. And by the way, in the environmental movement, some of the extremists, there is a deep anti-humanity in it. That if we could just get rid of all the people on the planet, it would be a great place to live.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because we cover those articles all the time. This is really gaining a lot of momentum, or has been in recent days until this scandal broke. The anti-baby movement, especially in Britain and in places in Europe.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that one of my concerns is that people will tend to say, well, you cheated and lied, and we just don't believe anything you tell us. And so the environmental issues and the science is going to suffer because of this. They've actually done more damage than what they were accusing us of doing, and so it's a very negative thing that's happened. But the anti-humanity thing, but I always joke about it, because I say, well, I'm familiar with it because a lot of my colleagues at the university said if we could get rid of all the students, it'd be a great place to work, But that deep-seated anti-humanity, and of course it's all tied up with, you see the arguments coming back about Darwin and all of these things, because these are all interrelated. Mm-hmm. And this idea that humans are not supposed to be here, and what we're doing is evil. It really is part of the same issue.
I want to stop you right there, because you mentioned earlier about something with regard to if the people only knew where this ultimately, their environmental rhetoric and where the environmentalism today, the political agenda, will ultimately lead, I mean, they would reconsider or re-question their commitment